Welcome to NAIFA's Advisor Today podcast series, where we focus on how financial advisors work, live, and give to their local communities and our greater financial services industry. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Advisors Today's podcast, where we interview and talk to some of the brightest minds in the insurance and financial services industry. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Suzanne Carawan. Hi, Suzanne.
Yes. Hi, Chris.
I'm Chris Gandy, one of your NAIFA trustees. We have a fantastic guest today, and she is the guru of gurus. I'm not going to steal her thunder, but let's kick it over to Suzanne. Suzanne, who's our sponsor? What's our sponsor for today's show?
So this entire episode is brought to us by NAIFA's NAIFA PAC. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about that as we get into it with Diane.
Awesome. So you want to introduce our guest today and I'll jump right in?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we thought would be really timely, important, et cetera, we're going to talk a little bit about a big event that we have coming up. But it's also what we like to call it NAIFA State Legislative Day season. And so we'll have Diane talk about what in the heck that means. But the other piece is it is Women's History Month. And so we want to make sure we touch on some of the pieces there as well. So we thought having Diane as our first podcast of the month would just be apropos on many different levels. So Diane Boyle here is our Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for NAIFA and a tenured staff member who has phenomenal relationships. And wait till we just hear about a day in the life of what Diane gets to do and goes out to protect all of us. So turn it back to you, Chris.
Awesome. So Diane Boyle, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is actually fun. And I like the little accolade side when we got to that seasoned part. And you did that really, really delicately, 31 years at NAIFA, kind of adds up quickly. But anyway, all fun. Thanks for having us.
So Diane, for those who don't know who you are, they've seen your name kind of probably in some NAIFA, I would call it part of the NAIFA stuff, right? There's a lot of NAIFA things that come out. Can you just share about your role at NAIFA and what you do specifically?
Sure. I head up NAIFA's government relations program. So that encompasses what you're going to hear me talk in threes. I realize that as we start talking about just legislative stuff, everything seems to come in threes. So it's state, interstate, and federal advocacy. And, that's what we focus on. We look at insurances primarily regulated by the states. So we have a whole legislative component there. The interstate is really an opportunity for model laws to be developed that then the states pick up on. So we influence at that level. And then obviously at the congressional level, we're very much involved there. So I oversee those sort of three segments of our advocacy and do that in a number of different ways. We do, if you go to the next three, you're talking about our PAC, which, Suzanne mentioned that this was brought to you by NAIFA PAC, which is our political action committee that helps fund candidates running for office. And we have a federal PAC that helps with the congressional candidates. And then we have 50 state NAIFA PACs, which actually support those state level candidates. So it's the PAC, our grassroots, and our professional lobbyists. That's sort of the next three of how we actually get into advocating. So my role is really to make sure that we're shooting on all of those cylinders.
So you have to be a jack of all trades.
Yes, I do.
You have to be a jack of all trades, master.
A jack. I don't know whether we say of all trades or, I may call it something else, but we'll keep it clean.
Well, you have to have the ability, you have to have a unique ability to deal with the political side of things. You have to have the ability to be able to deal with people like us as advisors, right? Who have short brains and everything is like, I need it now. We have to have the ability to deal with us. And then you have to have the ability to kind of put it all together and build bridges and new relationships with people who don't know, or that I would call it that collaboration of different resources so that we can be effective and efficient. So you do have to be a master of many. So with that,
You're talking about the political side, which is definite. We do it political policy and then sort of the people. And NAIFA members are our people. So it's our people, the political, when you get into all of the political dynamics that exist, and then actually the policy. How do we get that good policy for our people? And that's the education component, the jack of all trades, as you say, figuring out what voice to use and to amplify our voice by having us all say it the same way.
So if I'm an advisor, why should I care about if we go to DC once a year and we get a chance to take a picture on the Hill and maybe enter a Capitol building, should I care about the state or should I care about federal, or what should I be paying attention to?
Yes. I want you to pay attention to all of that. And the reason that why you want to be involved, Chris, and you know this, is there are 535 members of Congress that shape the way you do business. There's 7,000 state legislators that shape the way you do business. Whether you like it or you hate it or you want it to go away, that's how we develop our laws in our country, and they govern our products and the services that our members provide. So if you want to make sure that you have a favorable environment in order to operate into, then you need to be involved in advocacy. And I'll give you the selfish side of it, because I know we have salespeople on the call that probably care a little bit about that side too. So not only is it having the right environment in order to sell in, once you become active, you have yet another thing to go back to your clients and say, I'm fighting for you. We sat down and developed these plans because you said you wanted to save more, or you wanted to invest, whatever plan it is that you sat down and devised with your clients, either for their families or their businesses. You then have this extra talking point once you become politically active in saying, and not only did I help you plan for that, because we had these conversations, I'm involved to make sure that the plans that we put in place, that the government doesn't step in and change how they operate. And so all of a sudden it adds another layer of credibility to your relationship with your client. And that's huge.
It is. I know. I've run our member orientation program for a couple of years now. And the biggest, to debunk a myth, one of the biggest things that new advisors usually they're new advisors, new to the industry and or just new to NAIFA, they'll say, isn't there someone for that? Isn't that what the paid lobbyist does, right? So what do you normally say? Give us your pitch, Diane, that you do so well about why, like just a regular advisor, why that's important that they show up and it's not just the professional lobbyist.
Oh, yeah. And one, let's not ever underrate the professional lobbyist. Very, 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 very important.
We know a few that are good.
Very, 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 very important. No, but we said this at the beginning of the hour, that I've been with NAIFA for a really long time. I have really strong relationships with legislators on the Hill. We have a great state advocacy program. So we have professionals that are advocating for you. That's what your membership should do. But without fail, if I walk into a member's office, doesn't matter what I'm asking for, and they'll say, we have that trusted relationship. I understand what you're saying. I know it to be true. Is it true in my district? Give me a constituent who can say that that's true. And that's the need and the opportunity for the members to actually be involved. And it's an easy, tell them what you do. They don't know what you do. And if you look at the new Congress, there's so many new members of Congress. They don't know what you do. They don't understand the service that you provide to your members. Also, the member of Congress's constituents, which is who elected them to represent them in DC. So they're doing their job by saying, Diane, I need more than just you. I want you to help me with the technical language, but I want Chris to come in and tell me how that plays in Chicago, because I was brought here by constituents from Chicago, not from DC, not from Arlington, Virginia, not from New Orleans, Louisiana, where I'm from, right? They want Chicago, Illinois. And every member of Congress wants that. And that's something that only our constituents can do. Mm-hmm. And that means as soon as you join NAIFA, as soon as you enter the insurance profession, you should be paying attention and making sure that you're having and developing those relationships with those lawmakers. And how deep you want to dive into that relationship development is up to you. We can take you from, yep, I just monitor and engage when asked, to, you know what, I really got bit by the bug and I want to run for office. If you look at Congress, we have 5 members of Congress that are former NAIFA members. So you can run the gamut on how involved you want to be, but what shouldn't be optional is whether you get involved or not.
So if I had to ask the question, if I'm an advisor, how do I get involved? What do I do first? Like, how do I get involved? Like, explain that process to me.
So there are a number of different ways, Chris. And the easiest is you can go on NAIFA's website and say, hey, I want to be an advocacy ambassador. And we'll walk through. We have a great colleague named Andrew Holt, who heads up our grassroots program. And some people may say, what the heck is grassroots? Well, grassroots is that spread of people throughout that have those different relationships. And so Andrew will walk through different opportunities. A really great way is, and you named one of them, is to participate. Come to Washington, come to DC for our congressional conference. The congressional conference is May 22nd, 23rd. If you guys don't have that marked down on your calendars, do. Registration is open now. Register, come. It's fantastic. The beauty of congressional conference is that you're going to be paired with other NAIFA members to go in and see your member of Congress. We're going to give you talking points. You are going to get that fabulous photo that you talked about, Chris, where you have the Capitol or a monument in the background, which is just really pretty. It's a beautiful time to be in DC. But it's an easy way to start that relationship. We're not kind of going at it on your own. The other, and we're through a good number of them. Heck, we had 32 state legislative days scheduled in Q1. So by the end of this month, we will have completed 32 different states having legislative days. That's another way. If you've missed your state legislative day, look for it next year, or maybe come to DC and then jump in next year. If you haven't, yours is on the next two, the next quarters. Jump in and see when those state legislative days are. Also a really good opportunity to get involved more on the state level. And what people don't realize, I think sometimes, is like the life cycle of a politician is that they're going to go through, by and large, the state legislature, and then they make their way to Congress. So developing those relationships early on really matter, because to answer, Suzanne, like your question earlier, don't we have people that do that? Yeah, we have 3 lobbyists and a couple of consultants who develop relationships with members of Congress, but we're developing them with the members who sit on the committees of jurisdiction, primarily Ways and Means, Senate Finance, can name the others. But that's where we focus our attention. There are 535 of them. So we don't have detailed one-on-one personal relationships with them. But what happens is the relationships are developed at the state level. They come to Congress, then they land on our committees. And when they land on these key committees that we follow, they are A committees, which means everybody else in DC is scrambling to get to know them. So they're on the Republican side alone, 10 new members of the House Ways and Means Committee. It means I've got 10 new people to go introduce myself to, but everybody else in DC is clamoring to go meet these people too. But what I have that some of the other industries don't is I have our NAIFA members in every state and every congressional district. So when I walk in, they may not have met me before, but they've met our NAIFA members. And so I go in with a warm introduction instead of a cold call. And that's tremendous. So that's why that involvement early on by our members is so important. And it actually is really a lot of fun. You know your business better than anyone else. These lawmakers are dealing with everything from, at the state levels, transportation issues, and we have Chinese balloon hearings now in DC. It's crazy stuff all over the place. They're not experts in each of these issues. So they're looking to find someone that can help them make educated and informed decisions. And if you're not there, who's educating and informing them?
Yeah, that's exactly what John Wheeler and I were talking the other day, and we did a little interview, and his point was, he said he really struggled with this for a long time. He said just didn't get NAIFA PAC, didn't get the whole process until one day I think something you said and it clicked, and he said, wait, what am I doing? Who's going to do a better job talking about my business than me? Do I want to outsource that to anybody else? Like, no, I want me sitting at the table, right? Explaining why let's not do this with a particular law because that's going to hurt, and why. And so that's really what I think was his call to action. It clicked for him. And I think that, that's a common story.
I like the idea that you're right. The person to tell that, we don't want to play telephone, right? And so there are people that make the laws, there's people that enforce the laws, and people that actually use the laws, right? And so we are actually on the other side of that as advisors, trying to figure out how to make this make sense. I can speak to my experience. My first time experience, I think I said the first time I've ever been to DC was with NAIFA. So you guys are the people that brought me to DC, our nation's capital. And I remember the first time going through and going down in the tunnels, and I'm looking around like a young kid in high school, like, this is the capital, and starting to learn about DC. But we actually were sitting before everything was closed. But I remember sitting up top of one of the sessions, and we got a tour. But I remember sitting up top of one of the sessions. I'm like, wait a minute, that's what we see on TV down there, them talking, and actually, but that's what we actually see. And I remember having to go through that. But it's like this demystification of this big over this huge ecosystem that exists, and being able to navigate it all the way down to sitting with our congressperson locally, which was Kinzinger at the time, and having a conversation and realizing that I actually recruited his brother into the business when he was an intern. Which was Nathan Kinzinger, who's a Northwestern Mutual guy. So that's how connections and relationships work. And for someone that has never been, I think that was a great experience. So, Diane, let's talk about where we are. Obviously you've got probably a lot to say, but obviously we're on the cusp of, we've seen unprecedented Congress already, right? With all the votes. How many votes were there to seat a new speaker?
15.
But you did say it wasn't the most, right? You did tell us
not the most. No,
it was not the most. But obviously, with that being said, what do we need to know about this Congress? Because it's a fairly unique makeup, right? It's so what do we need to know? What do we need to pay attention to as we start to deal with this makeup of Congress?
Sure. There's some things that are the same and some things that are different. It's a divided Congress. We've had those before. We know how to work with them. NAIFA's policies are nonpartisan, so it doesn't matter what the mix up is, whether you have, and right now we have obviously the Senate controlled by Democrats, we have the House controlled by Republicans, we have a Democratic administration. Those are things that we've navigated before. What's really different this time is that we have record number of women. It's more diverse than Congress has ever been. Still has some challenges to meet the diversity of the population, and so does our industry, by the way. But when I went, and this goes back 3 Congresses ago, I think I got that right. Maxine Waters was first ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee. She was then, when the Democrats took control, made chairwoman of the committee. Now she's back to being ranking because the Republicans have the majority. But when she was first ranking, and if we were coming upon one of our we were in having a meeting and I said, we're going to bring constituents. And she says, oh, good. Bring some that look like me. Well, if you haven't met Maxine Water, she's an African-American female, mother, grandmother, lots of demographic labels that you could put on her, right? White men is who showed up. And I'm like, I know we have to have a woman, a grandmother, an African-American member. I need something that says and adds to our credibility the fact that she said to me, bring me people that look like me, because she wants them to look like her constituents. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that the white men in her district, because they were constituents, but they didn't have value with her, that they did, and they could communicate the same issues and the policies that we talk about, but it would have been that extra layer. When we say we want financial security for all, but we constantly show up with the same people, it's not quite as strong, right? We could be better. We could do better. And what I always find interesting is sometimes people think diversity means race and gender, and that's it. Diversity is so much more than that. As a matter of fact, Suzanne and I have a call later today on the ABLE accounts. And I don't know if you guys remember that. It was 2014, I think, that we worked on it. And basically the ABLE accounts allow people with disabilities to save without losing access to some of the government program benefits that they're entitled to. So people with disabilities, that's different. That adds diversity. Everything. We need to mirror ideally what our population looks like when we're legislating, if we're truly saying that we want financial security for all, and that's what we're trying to achieve. But a step even closer, if we can't quite get there yet, we've got to match the diversity of Congress. And you know what? Our membership actually has that. We're starting to see, and I always joke when I first started going to NAIFA members, we would go to a big meeting and we'd go into the large restrooms that have multiple stalls, and I'd walk into the ladies' room and it would be, oh my. and now it's a inconvenience that I welcome. I walk in and sometimes there's a wait for the ladies' room because NAIFA's membership has become more diverse, at least male, female wise. But you know what I'm still not seeing? I'm still not seeing the females or the women in our group to actually engage in advocacy. And they need to, because record number of women in the 118th Congress, it's the Congress that we're in now, they're going to want to see that. Our voices differ slightly. We want to all say the same thing, but we want to be able to show that it crosses all of the diversity lines that are out there, right? So that we really are trying to achieve that financial security for all. So what are the obstacles that different segments of our society encounter? And do we as an industry have products and services to help those individuals? And we do. But we have to be able to communicate it that way. And we add credibility to our communication when we have those diverse voices all singing together.
And I think when you put it from that perspective, I mean, if you talk to most advisors and you say, hey, are your women clients important, right? Like, are they, when you're doing planning, what does that look like? I mean, since 1946, there's been more women in the United States than men, right? And yet no one's really thinking about it that way. So we all know from an advisor standpoint, you're like, oh yes, we know what happens if, it's a kind of traditional, quote unquote, traditional husband-wife, and the husband dies, and those stats for the woman changing her advisor is like something, what it's like 80 some percent, right? So we know that, but then how do we miss the gap to say, okay, so therefore women as advisors need to get politically active. We haven't connected the dots on that one yet.
Well, I think it's, Suzanne, I'll just add, I think it's even deeper than that, right? It's one is, I think people have to be willing to accept change, or at least appreciate it and understand it, right? Whether they participate or not, it's different than what they remember. And it's even going to be even more different for the people that are just now, the workforce now. Maybe look at the workforce now. It's completely different. You even have some scenarios where, whether it's men, whether it's women, whether it's non-gender, it doesn't, at the end of the day, people are less segmented in the younger population than segmented. So if we're going to be the voice for them, and Congress is going to be the voice of those people, then it's going to start to look different, right? And so that is part of the awareness and acceptance, and it is fighting a historic, history, right? And so Diane, fighting history, that's very interesting. What would you say is one of the things that, as an advisor, I can do to have my voice be heard, either locally or nationally, specifically in and around the political space?
So on the political space, there are a couple of different ways that you can engage. You can engage on that policy level, which really is developing that relationship with your lawmaker. So that assumes that they've already been elected. So who are your existing legislators? And we can tell you that. If you go into NAIFA's Advocacy Action Center, you'll type in your home address. We'll tell you exactly who all your legislators are. Get to know them. That's going to shape that policy. The other way that you can get involved is on the candidate side. And if you're a political junkie like I am, that's actually kind of exciting too, because you can say, you know what? I hate the guy that represents me or the gal that represents me, and I want somebody else in. Now you can play in the candidate world, right? Because in the way that you do that is through contributing to NAIFA PAC is how we do it. What the PAC does, and people misunderstand this a good bit, you can't buy a vote. There are limitations on how much can be given to candidates. So it absolutely doesn't buy a vote. What it does is it buys you access an opportunity to develop a relationship. It allows us to support candidates that have an understanding of our industry. That's what the PAC does. It supports candidates. You as an advisor can get involved in both contributing to the PAC, but also developing those relationships with candidates. And that gives you your opportunity to say, hey, I'm volunteering on a campaign. You're getting to know somebody before they're elected into office. You're developing that relationship. So now they kind of know you. They kind of know what you do. They know who you serve. When they're faced with a policy discussion, if they're elected, they're going to know to contact that Chris guy. He kind of knew what he was talking about. So you've helped them by developing a relationship in the candidate base. What I want to stress here, though, if your candidate loses, because I hear this all the time, I got involved in the campaign, great candidate, understood our issues, was the go-to guy, and they lost, so I'm out. No, the guy who lost doesn't have a vote. I don't care how great they were, they don't have a vote. The guy who won has a vote, and I would argue even more important for you to develop a relationship with them. You know why? Because they didn't agree with you, Chris. They didn't, because if they did, you probably would have been supporting them. So they probably don't have an understanding of our industry. They're in greatest need of that relationship with you. It doesn't mean that when they're up for re-election that you still can't go back to that candidate that you love best. But you have to be willing to continue to have those conversations with people that you disagree with, because they're in need of the education the most. And that would be my take on how you could kind of get involved, both developing on the policy relationship side and then supporting the candidates. And you can do that with the PAC is how we do it.
Diane, let me unpack what I think I heard you say, right? There's a lot there, right? So hopefully if you're out there and you're watching this podcast, you go back and rewind it. She unpacked a lot in that little short period of time. Is number one, she said, get involved. Number two, build some relationships. Number three, help shape policy. You can't buy votes, but you can actually help shape policy through advocating and getting your message out there. And then come to DC, participate in the NAIFA PAC. There's a series of different steps you kind of said there. You rattled them off pretty fast. And so if you got a chance, go back and re-listen to this. Diane's great. And if you spend time with her, you need to have your pen ready so you can go back and start to do those things, because it's not just about listening, it's about taking action, right? And if you're going to take action, get involved. That's what I would encourage you all to do. So Diane, a day in the life of Diane Boyle. What does that actually look like? Because it sounds like you're talking to politicians, you're talking to advisors, you're helping people coordinate, you're talking to lobby. Like, so what is that? What's a day in the life of Diane Boyle?
Well, and the reason why I'm really laughing at that one, Chris, is I have 3 boys. My youngest son is a senior in high school. And the other day, suddenly, all of a sudden, he realizes, like, oh, I'm going to college. Like, eventually, I'm going to have to become a professional. I'm going to have to be self-sustaining at some point. So how am I going to do that? And he goes, so he's kind of paying attention. Like, he's lived with me all his life and is just now noticing what I do. And he goes, so what exactly do you do? And he goes, because I've been home now, and after the pandemic, I'm working primarily from home, and then I go to the Capitol. I'm actually closer from my house than headquarters, so I kind of do a little bit of both. So he's been hearing, and he goes, it sounds like you talk a lot. And,
Right.
and then you recommend other people to go talk to other people. And I'm like, yeah, that's true too. And then you go out to eat a lot, and you drink a lot. And he goes, that's like what I do. No, actually, it's not a lot like what you do, but close. But so I do. You're right. I get up. Typically, if Congress is in session, as a matter of fact, they're coming back in person again, which is really exciting because, even though some of the other states have been open for a while, the Congress, even though they've been meeting again in person, they hadn't opened up the Congressional complex completely. And so we would go in for episodic. It wasn't open, it is now, where we could go in and basically what lobbyists are called troll the halls. You walk throughout the buildings, you pop in and meet people in addition to your scheduled appointments. So if Congress is in session, which they typically are Tuesday through Thursday, there'll be a breakfast event, usually at 8 or 8:30. I don't like the 8 o'clocks. 8:30 for some reason is okay, but there's usually a breakfast. Then there's a lunch meeting and typically a dinner or reception. And I was talking with another lobbyist the other day, and they were like, my gosh, remember we did this 3 or 4 nights a week, 3 to 4 events a day, in addition to the actual policy side. That would be the political side, those events that I was talking about. Then you have your policy discussions where you're going in and meeting with staff and members of Congress to sit down and say, okay, you're looking at a proposal. Let me share where I think there needs to be changes or how that would impact our members and the clients that they serve. And so you're having those conversations too. And then you're right. Then I'm talking because if I'm going to represent you, I've got to talk to our members and know what your thoughts are. So as we're starting to hear things, and I'll give you a good example. There was legislation that was introduced at the end of last Congress where we were like, wait a minute, where did this come from? This is not good. And the not good part was it was looking to introduce a government-run retirement plan. In the press release or the impetus behind it was not everyone has access to employer-sponsored retirement plans. Mm-hmm. And this is true. But that doesn't mean that they don't have access to you, Chris, that somebody can walk into your office anytime, whether you work for an association, a company, or you're self-employed, and you can help them plan for their retirement. Am I right?
Sure.
So why is there a need for this government program then to duplicate efforts? So we kind of scratched our head. So then that gets into the other part of my day where I go, okay, now I'm going to look at the sponsors of the legislation and I'm going to say, Chris, you got to call your guy. He's missing the point here because we just passed Secure 2.0, which for small employers now has more opportunities than ever to put together plans, some incentives to help small employers put together plans for their employees. You've got on the individual retirement side opportunities. let's talk through, because we're missing a step here. So it's not that they need to hear just from Diane, but Diane needs to pick up the phone and say, hey, who in this district? Because I can't have you, as I said, Chris, it wasn't your member. So that's why you didn't actually get a phone call. You want to be strategic in who you have place those calls, because they have limited resources. And while the laws that they put in place affect everyone, the individual members of Congress were elected to represent their constituents. So you don't want to have a non-constituent calling. One, they're not going to take your calls for the most part. They're going to redirect you and say, oh, your representative is Danny Davis. I'm going to go ahead and transfer you now. And you're like, but Danny's not sponsoring the bill. But that's where you're going to land, because I don't want to talk to you. You're not mine. So that's why we have a very robust grassroots program where we track not only whose district you're in, but who our members develop relationships with. So if you went to college or you played ball with somebody that's now in Congress, I want to know that relationship, because that helps me gauge whether they're going to take your phone call, whether you're just growing that relationship, whether you have an established relationship, whether we need to couple you with 2 or 3 other different advisors to come in, whether they have a very diverse district. So then we're going to want to have all aspects of the district represented. Anyway, so we put together those kind of plans. I guess that's, what was my question? What do I do in a day? That's what I do in a day.
Well, you do a lot. You do a lot. So, I'm going to bring in something different. It wasn't on our questions, but I'm interested. So I see that with this new Congress, more than ever, there's more people utilizing social media, right? From TikTok to
we can't use TikTok in the government, but go on.
Instagram to Facebook to whatever, right? So they're using these social medium platforms, whether it's to spread the message or to get out their perspective or whatever it may be, right? How do you see that playing out with the impact as it deals with insurance and advisory work? Because we also are in a regulated space, right? There's certain things we can and can't use, but is that a medium that we as NAIFA and as NAIFA members can actually engage with our leaders that way also, since they are so active? There are some that are super active, obviously, and there's some that are still old school, and I'm not touching that. And then that is one question, part A, and then part B is, will that be a significant part of the way we engage with, politicians and our leaders in those areas going forward?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And they all serve a different a role. I would encourage everyone to follow your legislators. Find out what they are saying and not saying on social media. It's a good way for you to kind of get to know them. You're not going to change, and I think this is true across the board, whether you're dealing with, your Uncle Johnny or you're dealing with your elected official. You're not going to change their position fighting over social media.
Sure.
But what you do is you learn where they are. You can say thank you. I can't stress enough how much, if you have an opportunity to thank a legislator, they really do feel thankless, and not in an arrogant, you don't appreciate me kind of way, but they get the hard punches. If we don't like what they're doing, we're loud about saying no. If you can be the guy who's developing the relationship, don't thank them needlessly. If they're screwing up, please don't go on social media and say thank you. But if they're doing something right, there's an opportunity to say, hey, thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. Thank you for having this discussion with me. And when you're on the Hill, when you do come to congressional conference or go to your state Ledge Day, always take that opportunity to have that social media. Hey, I met with Representative so-and-so to discuss retirement. One, they appreciate it because they're trying to get out to their constituents that they're listening and we do good stuff. So now it's, I was the legislator who was listening to the white hat guys and having a conversation, trying to preserve your financial security and give you greater access. So they look good when you post it. You look good because you see it and go, wait a minute, Chris Gandy guy was in DC. Look at him with the big words. So it's good for you. Absolutely, there's a role for social media, and I think you need to be engaged. You should be engaged. It should be all positive. That would be my stress. If you're going negative on social media, you're going to lose. And I love your I guess description of the varying levels. If you look at our Senate leader, Chuck Schumer still uses a flip phone, but Chuck Schumer will not miss an opportunity to talk to the press, including social media. So he has staff that are utilizing it, and they watch it and they monitor. And if you go back to that relationship development, when you get to that level too, that you have a relationship with a lawmaker, and then you're the guy who goes to their town hall meeting or their teletown hall meeting, and you ask a meaningful question and you give them the platform to look good. Ooh, I like seeing that Chris guy, and he's knowledgeable. So when I have a question, I'm going to call him. And social media does that too, right? It reinforces all of the conversations and the relationship development that you've done on the back end and in person. So I absolutely think it's a really good way to engage. And like you said, they're there. So it's a good way for us to learn what they care about. And just like when we sit down and have conversations, knowing a little bit about each other is kind of cool and good to know. So all of a sudden, if you're watching them on social media, not only do you know their stance on our issues, you might know that you guys support the same charitable organization. So the next time you see him, you can say, hey, that was really cool. I was there too.
Yep. Speeds up the relationship, right? Build rapport faster.
Yep.
Yeah, building rapport is super important when building trust, and building trust is the name of the game. We need to trust them as they need to trust us, right? As the voice of Main Street.
Yeah, well said.
As the longest standing professional association in this industry, in the insurance industry, we have something that others do not have. I'll get off my soapbox for that purpose of that exercise, but let's get involved here. So Diane, Suzanne, do you have anything else for Diane before I put her through the?
Yep, we got to wrap it up and go to our lightning round.
Diane, we are coming up on Congressional conference. So how do they find you? I mean, are you going to be at Congressional conference?
I will absolutely be at Congressional.
Oh, okay.
I love Congressional conference. This is like my happy time, is when all of the agents come to DC. And so you've heard me say this a million times, Chris, but you're going to have to listen to me again. It's like my proudest moment. Congressional conference, there are members from every state that come. It's the optic that lobbyists dream about, right? All of my members are here from every state. And I get in the elevator and a member of Congress looks at me and he's like, Diane, you people are everywhere. And I'm like, I know. Yes, I will absolutely be at Congressional conference. It is a fantastic opportunity. Again, May 22nd, 23rd. You can register at NAIFA.org. And we want everybody to be there because I want to be able to say again, we have members from every state. I want the legislators to feel like you guys are everywhere because that in their mind says you represent a lot of people. You represent a lot of people that I'm supposed to represent. So if you're telling me something is good, then it probably is good and I probably should do that. If you're offering caution, I should probably pay attention to that too. And it really is that optic. You talked about developing trust. You can do that in a number of different ways. The beauty of the Congressional conference is it's a visual of it's not just in this segment, it's universal. And so it's really important and exciting and fun.
Well, we look forward to seeing you at Congressional Conference and Suzanne also. But Diane's team does a great job, everyone. They will have us prepared. They'll have us educated, and they will have us ready to go to the Hill and be able to bring together one voice for NAIFA collectively as we start to touch base with our local representation in DC and our state, our national legislators. With that being said, let's move on to the lightning round, which is always fun because no one knows what questions I'm going to ask. But, Diane, the name of the game here is just whatever off the top of your head. It is what it is. It is what it is, right? And so we'll start with one that I'm sure you probably have thought about, but favorite museum in DC?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a tough one. So there are lots of favorite museums. The one, all right, Air and Space.
Air and Space, wonderful. Favorite movie?
My Cousin Benny.
Everybody gets a chuckle out of that. Got it? Favorite landmark in DC?
Oh gosh, what just popped in my head, and I don't know that it's my favorite, but it's not bad, is The Awakening. They just moved it. But anyway.
The Awakening, okay. So if you're on this podcast, venture to The Awakening when you come to DC for Congressional Conference. Last two. You ready? So if you can go back in time and meet with any one of the presidents and have breakfast, who would it be and why?
Thomas Jefferson, and probably because, and this is going to be a goofy reason, but I'm going to tie it back to the monument. His monument is really cool. If you ever go, it's his whole life depicted, like there are tobacco leaves that actually grow up the side because he raised tobacco. Anyway, so Thomas Jefferson, because he has a cool monument, and I want to know more about all of the little aspects of the monument that were represented.
Okay. I have two for you, actually.
Okay.
DC is known for like these little secret spaces for food. I know because I've gone, I'm like, so favorite place that you've probably never heard of in DC to eat. Everyone take your pen out because you probably don't know these places.
All right, so I'm going to do one that's actually not in DC proper, only because it's across the street from our soon-to-be new headquarters. There's a speakeasy called Salt, and it's in Arlington, Virginia, directly across the street from NAIFA's new headquarters.
Okay, wonderful. And then last but not least, Diane, if I'm getting into the business today, and this is my first time coming to Congressional Conference, what advice would you give me?
Wear comfortable shoes.
Wear comfortable shoes.
You want more than that?
Yeah, I'm assuming so there's a lot of walking involved, right?
There's a lot of walking. And look, I said I was from New Orleans. New Orleans is flat. DC is at Capitol Hill is actually a hill.
Yeah.
And, people think, oh, I'm going into the Capitol. I'm going to get fancy. I'm going to put on my nice dress shoes. And then we're hiking you back and forth. And the Capitol itself takes up a good amount of space. So to think that, oh, I'm just crossing the Capitol from the Senate office building to the House office building, it really is a pretty long jaunt. You've done that, huh?
Yeah.
And we make you walk fast.
That's an Uber. That's actually an Uber ride because
that's right.
It is quite the 45-minute, and that's if you're moving. It's 45 minutes. It's not an easy walk. So thank you, Diane. Suzanne, do you have anything else before we give it to Diane for her final words?
Nope, that's it. Thanks,
okay.
Everybody. Yeah.
Diane, do you have any final words for our wonderful listeners and podcast enthusiasts?
I do. And one, thank you. Thank you very much. This was fun. This was a nice change in my routine. If you're not a member, join. If you're a member, get involved. and come to the Congressional Conference, participate in your legislative day. And if there's ever anything that I can do for you, I'm here to represent you. So just give me a call.
Thank you, Diane. So thanks, everyone. I'll wrap us up. Thanks for everyone for tuning in to Advisor, today's podcast where we talk to the leaders like Diane Boyle. Thank you, Diane, for being here. Thank you, Suzanne, wonderful Suzanne, our co-host, for being here and putting this all together. Just a reminder that NAIFA is a place where we collectively come together to uplift and to encourage and to support each other, as we are in a place where we represent our clients as best we possibly can for Main Street America. But at the end of the day, our whole point is to make everyone here a better person. So we appreciate it. Thanks. God bless. Have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you at Congressional Conference.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for NAIFA's Advisor Today podcast series. Make sure to subscribe to get future episodes. And if you're interested in coming on the show, let us know.